Hi, Todd Martin here. In this series of videos, I'm going to try to help you improve your functional whole body movement by learning the various patterns of core action that allow the body to move with perfect alignment and with minimal impact. These videos are going to be helpful for those who are studying either the walking code or the Tai Chi code, or for those who are just interested in getting a better idea of the fundamentals of how we control all of our body movements using our core. And remember, if you like this video, please share it, thumbs up, and subscribe. Before we go any further, I'm going to briefly summarize the foundational principles of the movement system that I use to understand the core. This system I call direction, root, power. Direction refers to the rotation of the thoracic spine using the upper abdominal muscles. Root refers to the rotation of the lumbar spine and pelvis using the lower abdominal muscles. And power refers to either extension or flexion of my hips that power all of my movements. When we use the core properly, we are synchronizing both rotation of the thoracic spine, rotation of the lumbar spine, and action of the hip joints all at the same time to produce what we see as one whole body movement. So in this series of videos, I'm going to define each pattern of movement we discuss with the core principles of direction, root, and power. The three divisions of our core, the thoracic spine rotation, the lumbar spine rotation, and our hip actions, all have a functional role in body movement that take place through rotation of the body. It's quite easy to see the rotation of the spine and how that affects movement, because you can see I'm turning counterclockwise or turning clockwise with my thoracic spine rotation. You can also see my belly button and pelvis turning clockwise or counterclockwise. It's a little harder to see the rotational action of the hip joints, but it is there, and I'll show you through a demonstration. If I extend my right hip, what I'm doing is pushing my body towards the left, so essentially causing a leftward turn away from the extending hip. On the other hand, if I flex my right hip, that causes my body to pull in the direction of that hip. So extension of the hip causes the body to turn away from the extending hip. Flexion of the hip causes the body to turn in the direction of the flexing hip. So flexion of the hip pulls the body in a direction towards that flexing hip. Extension of the hip pushes the body in a direction away from the extending hip. In this video, we're going to focus on two core movement patterns that we use every day in normal life, and we also use in Tai Chi. In Tai Chi, these two patterns are referred to as split and elbow strike. In the walking code and in basic fundamental body movements, I refer to these same patterns as set, which corresponds to split in Tai Chi, and sink, which corresponds to elbow strike in Tai Chi. So let's look at what those patterns are. In both of these, set and sink, or split and elbow strike, we are using flexion of the active hip. So one of my hips is going to be flexing. Flexing means either lifting this hip off the ground, this is hip flexion, or if there's weight on this leg, flexion of the hip would be the intention of pulling the knee forward, which might get the leg off the ground or might just help advance my center of gravity forwards. In either case, the intention is one of pulling the leg forward, not pushing the leg back. pushing the leg back would be hip extension. So in both the movements of split and elbow strike, or set and sink, we are flexing the active hip. Also, in both of these movements, we are rooting the leg opposite of the flexing hip. So if I'm flexing my right hip, meaning lifting it up, I am turning my lower torso towards the opposite leg. I might be flexing my right hip and turning my lower torso towards the left. So essentially, I'm turning my belly button towards the left leg, which is the lumbar spine rotation, while at the same time tucking my pelvis on the left, which is another function of my lumbar spine rotation. So power is flexion of my right hip. Rooting is going to be on the opposite side from the flexing hip. Now the difference between split and elbow strike, or set and sink, is in the direction, or the rotation of the thoracic spine. In split, what I'm doing is turning my upper torso towards the flexing hip. So I'm turning the left side of my upper torso, using my left upper abdominal muscles, turning it towards the right. This would be a split action. Or I could be flexing my left hip, rooting my right leg, and turning the upper torso towards the right, which essentially gets a feeling of going forwards. What you'll see in split in this circumstance, where I'm just shifting weight, is my right leg stays on the ground as I shift my weight to the left. And when I switch this way, switching my weight to the right, my left leg stays on the ground. I'm now going to switch back and forth between split using my right hip flexion and split using left hip flexion. Now, the difference between split and elbow strike, as I said, is in the direction of the upper torso rotation. So whereas in split, I'm turning my upper torso, the direction towards the flexing hip, in elbow strike, I'm going to turn my upper torso away from the flexing hip. And you see the difference in what happens. When I use elbow strike, what I'm doing is collecting my right leg off the ground, compared to split, where I did the same action of the hip and the lower torso rotation, but my right leg stayed on the ground. Why is that, you might ask? It's because of this. When I have rotational energy turning towards this right leg, it keeps this leg from lifting off the ground. I have some energy projecting over that way because of the rotation of the upper torso. That prevents this leg from being able to lift. This is split with flexion of the right hip. Now let's see if I simply turn my upper torso to the left, I remove the weight from this right leg and it causes my right leg to collect to the side. So let me demonstrate again. This is split. This is elbow strike. Or, in the walking code terminology, this is set and this is sink. When I'm doing normal walking technique, I'm using set anytime I begin to change weight when I'm moving in a forward direction. So I'll back up a couple steps. If I'm going to do a normal step forward, I'm going to use set with flexion of my right hip as I root the left leg and turn the upper torso clockwise. This is the beginning of each normal step we do. I would then finish off with a different core movement to continue moving the body forwards. If I actually wanted to turn in a different direction, starting from the same position, instead of using set, which has energy going towards my right leg, I use sink. And I would turn my body towards the forward leg to start the movement. Then when I complete the step, I would end up turning. That turn has been set up by this initial rotation of the upper torso in a counterclockwise direction. Then when I finish off the step normally, that turn action has already been established into the step, and it just follows through into the completion. Now let's practice an exercise combining the actions of split and elbow strike into one whole body movement that is going to shift our weight from 2 legs on the ground to 1 leg on the ground, and then back to the neutral position with 2 legs on the ground, and then to the other side with 1 leg on the ground. The first part of the movement is going to be a shift to the right leg using split. I'm going to get my arms involved for a better visual. I'm turning my upper torso in a direction counterclockwise. I'm rooting my right leg, and I am flexing or lifting my right hip. The leg doesn't leave the ground because my rotational energy of the upper torso is moving into that leg, keeping it on the ground. I'm going to complete the movement by turning my upper torso towards the right, towards the standing leg, and that is going to release the left leg from the ground and complete my ball-carrying single leg stance position. My upper torso and lower torso are now turning both clockwise, and I have counterclockwise rotational energy happening from the flexion of my left hip. That ultimately gets me to this position. Now we're going to shift our weight back to the center, and now we're going to shift to the left leg using split. My direction is clockwise. My root is on the left, and I'm flexing my right hip. I'm now going to complete the motion by changing the direction to counterclockwise, which releases the right leg from the ground and completes the ball carrying position. Now we can shift back to neutral, and then we can shift to the right leg, back to neutral, shift to the left leg, back to neutral, shift to the right leg, back to neutral, shift to the left leg.